Today we're talking about cottages, traditional ones, and how they inspired me to transform this little house we bought 8 years ago. So, does decorating the interior of a house in the cottage style make the house a cottage? Well, what's a cottage? Now let's start with the structure. According to Wikipedia, a cottage is a small, simple dwelling made of locally available traditional materials. Now, in medieval times, the feudal lord owned the land, or the cot from the Old French. So the tenant, also known as a serf or cottager, worked full-time for the lord and farmed the land. The dwelling on the plot of land came to be known as a cottage. This charming cottage is in Devon, and it's made of cob with a thatched roof. Cob is essentially mud, and thatch is a type of grass. The construction materials were inexpensive, but the process was very labor intensive. This was not a glamorous style of construction. In regions where stones were abundant, the tenants built stone cottages, and the windows were just covered with wooden shutters. As time passed, the original functioning shutters were joined with casement windows with glass that opened like the shutters. These cottages and the tenancy were passed down through the generations, like Daisy on Downton Abbey receiving the rights to the cottage from her father-in-law. Now, in America, the first thing that comes to mind for most of us when we think about cottages is English cottage. But other types of cottages have strong regional geographic connections, like a cabin in the woods of Scandinavia or the mountains of North America, a bungalow at the beach, a chalet in the Alps, a gatekeeper's house or carriage house on the grounds of a large country estate, a dacha in Russia or Eastern Europe. Now, every place in the world has some version of a cottage. Remember that cottage in Devon? It is essentially the same construction as this hut in Africa. To our Western eyes, one looks romantic and the other primitive, but they are both cottages that are sturdy and well suited to their locations, built essentially the same way. But for most people, Disney has pretty much defined cottage for us. You know, there's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Sleeping Beauty growing up in the fairy's cottage, and Belle's house in the little village. Probably why many of us tend to think fairy tale cottage. Small, old-fashioned, quirky, nestled in nature, rustic, sometimes a bit lopsided, and definitely cozy, inviting, and magical. When we purchased our house in 2015, I knew it met the basic criteria for a cottage, small and simple. But I immediately saw the potential for that fairy tale cottage we all recognize. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever been to Carmel by the Sea in California. It is a fabulous fairy tale village about 2 hours south of San Francisco. It is magical. Definitely go if you're ever nearby. I visited there just as I became an empty nester. All I could think was, wouldn't it be fun to sell the big house and get a tiny little cottage like this? Now, I wasn't about to spend $5 million for a 1,300 square foot cottage in Carmel, even if it was walking distance to the beach. But this house was my chance to create that feel. So with a lot of inspiration and a little creativity, we created our own fairy tale cottage. So here are the goals I had for the house. First, I wanted to make the house look like it could have been built during the colonial period, considering that the house is in Virginia. Next, I had to have the house become one with nature, disappearing under the trees and viewing the garden from every window. And lastly, I wanted to create cozy, comfortable spaces, both inside and out, that would hold little surprises and treasures and generations of memories. The house needed lots of help. The first decision we made was to remove the vinyl siding that was probably installed in the 60s. The original structure, built in 1942, was cinderblock, like this house in my neighborhood. One of the classic features of a cottage is that it be built with local materials. Now, wood is locally available, but I wasn't excited about more siding. Most people think brick Georgian houses when they think about our location near DC, but strangely, tradition says that the earliest brick houses in the American colonies were constructed of bricks imported from England. They provided ballast for the ship, and the more prosperous colonists got to follow the latest trends in England. But some of the oldest surviving structures in this area were made not of brick, but of local stone. The oldest surviving building in Washington, D.C. is the old stone house in Georgetown, built in 1765. So when I suggested stone, my husband was instantly on board. We went with a wonderful stonemason who refused to work with synthetic stone, like all the other companies were recommending. It was our single biggest expense and probably the best money we spent. I have mentioned before that the sides of a house should be given the same veneer as the front to make it look like the whole house was originally constructed of the same material. The windows were neither original to the house nor in good condition. The next thing I wanted was those old casement windows, not double hungs. They open outward rather than sliding up and down, a very historic style of window and very cottagey. The little roof over the front door was, again, not original and very poorly constructed. It was falling off the house, really, and we had a variety of needs to address, so we just replaced it with a charming new front porch with old-fashioned knee braces at the corners and climbing roses. Shutters, window boxes, stone pathways, and climbing ivy added to the cottage effect. The connection with nature is an important ingredient for any good cottage. This garden was extremely overgrown, an ongoing battle, but I recognized many flowering trees, shrubs, and perennials under the growth that could be the foundation for a wonderful cottage garden. My favorite changes to the garden are the climbing roses, lupin, and hydrangeas. Let me know if you're interested in an exact breakdown of what we changed in the garden, or does that sound tedious? Would it help if I just did one small area at a time? Well, let me know what you think in the comments. And to tell the truth, we continue to change the yard every year, adding more pathways, reworking beds, removing and cutting back original plantings. There are still 5 or 6 rather large projects that will take years to complete. A garden is never finished, and there's always something that needs to be done on a house. Now, inside, Cottages have several distinctive features: small square footage, small rooms, tight spaces, sloped ceilings upstairs. Are you picking up on a theme? And additions are often quirky. Our house was 100% on those attributes. Now, authentic European cottages generally have fireplaces or wood stoves, rustic beams or wood paneling. We had no fireplace, and the beams were made of foam. Yeah, foam. And the paneling was those 4x8 sheets of cheap imitation paneling, essentially plywood, in the 60s and 70s. Didn't exactly scream cottage to me. Now, our interior remodel was all about solving the quirky additions. It's obvious the house had at least 2 additions, probably 3. I have shown the original floor plan and the revised one in a previous video, but I thought you might enjoy seeing it again. This was the original downstairs floor plan. The front door is on the left. The biggest problems were, first, having to walk through the narrow kitchen and utility room with a really awkward step just to get to the back half of the house where all the additions were made. Next, that awkward step down and another step up between the 3 parts of the house needed to be raised because we had to have wheelchair accessibility. We also didn't have a functional dining area near the kitchen, and the washer and dryer were almost 20 feet apart. Since we were not ready to move or remodel, we decided to rent out the house for a year. Even though this is a fabulous location and we cleaned up the house, we had a hard time renting it because the floor plan was so weird. This is the revised floor plan. The biggest changes were opening a passageway under the stairs, incorporating the old garden closet into the living space, and moving the kitchen to the old sunroom. By removing walls and opening the center of the house, we were able to create a great room. It also left space for a laundry room, library, and powder room on the main level. Now, if you want a closer look at what we did, I will put a link in the description for one of my earliest videos that goes into more detail. It was one of my first attempts at editing, so don't judge too harshly. Once we created our cottage, it was time to decorate, and of course, the style was going to be European cottage style with a strong French accent. In general, cottage style is having a moment. This spin-off on farmhouse that leans to cottage is referred to as cottage core, a new name for an old style that's been around for decades. No, correction, for centuries. So what is cottage style? Well, traditional overstuffed furniture that's often slip-covered, antiques and vintage furniture including mismatched tables and chairs, assorted combinations of furniture throughout the house, often handed down from family or purchased secondhand, a combination of patterns and prints for fabrics and wallpapers, including chintzes, and often mixing lots of patterns, collected decor and vintage finds, floral prints and botanicals, fresh flowers, plants, and seating on the front porch. A casual, comfortable, cozy look that evolves over time. Now, our little cottage is not grand or spectacular or impressive. The most common adjective people use to describe my home is cozy. Nothing is perfect, formal, or brand new. And it's only on trend by accident, like the broken clock that's right twice a day. I can't connect you to an item on Amazon or send you to Target or Home Goods to buy the exact same pieces I have. No one else could have a home just like mine, but people often tell me they're inspired to pull out a family piece they have tucked away after seeing how I display my family objects. I'd love to hear about your family pieces in the comments. Now, question for you. Did I accomplish my goals? A cozy, comfortable house that looks like it's been here for centuries and melts into the surrounding garden? Well, let me know what you think. After a short visit, my little granddaughter, who was 3 at the time, looked wistfully at her mother and said, "I miss Grandma's house." Happens to be my favorite compliment of all time. And if you're missing my house, just watch another video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.